Inside Pelican Bay, the prison where justice doesn't exist. The screams echoed down the corridor of Pelican Bay like ghosts trapped in steel. A man named Terrence Lewis slammed his fists against the door of his solitary cell, shouting for help. Blood covered his knuckles. The intercom crackled once, then silence. 4:47 hours, no guard came. The lights never turned off. The cameras, mounted high in the corners, kept rolling. But no one stopped the beating that was happening 2 cells down. A group of correctional officers had dragged another inmate, known only as Ghost, out of his cell after he refused to hand over a tray. They said it was routine force. But what followed wasn't routine. The hallway cameras caught nothing. The angle was blacked out. When Ghost was finally brought back, his jaw was broken, one eye swollen shut. He didn't speak again. By sunrise he was dead. And when Terrence screamed again, this time begging for someone to call medical, the guard on duty turned up the radio volume in the control booth. No report was filed. No one was punished. Because at Pelican Bay, justice doesn't exist. Now let's rewind. To understand how a place like this exists inside the United States, the so-called land of freedom, we have to go back to how Pelican Bay came to be. When the gates first opened in 1989, it wasn't built to reform men. It was built to bury them. Buried under 23-hour lockdown, total isolation, and silence so thick it could drive a man insane. The prison was split in 2 worlds. General population, where the lucky inmates worked, ate, and fought for control. And the SHU, the secure housing unit, where the worst of the worst were locked in concrete boxes no bigger than a parking space. Every door was made of steel. Every sound was monitored. Even conversation was forbidden. The air was thick with tension because everyone knew. One mistake, one word could get you thrown into the SHU. Terrence wasn't a violent man when he came in. He was sentenced for armed robbery, 10 years. He thought he could do the time, stay quiet, go home. But Pelican Bay had other plans. In here you either belonged to someone, or you were prey. It didn't matter who you were before. Once the doors slammed, survival had new rules. The first time Terrence saw someone disappear, it was during chow line. A man stepped out of line without permission. 2 guards grabbed him, twisted his arms, and dragged him out the door. He never came back. Later, Terrence learned the word everyone whispered. Green Wall. That was what the inmates called the Brotherhood of Guards. Men who protected each other no matter what happened inside. If they beat you, if they planted evidence, if they looked away during a killing, no one said a word. And if you tried to report it, your next cell search would accidentally destroy your legal papers. Your mail would vanish. Your food tray might arrive with something that didn't belong there. But despite the fear, Terrence couldn't ignore what he saw. He began keeping notes, dates, times, names. He planned to send them to an outside journalist. Until one night, someone slid a note under his door. It said, "Stop writing or next time it'll be you." Terrence froze. He didn't know who sent it, another inmate or a guard. But that night his lights flickered. The sound of boots echoed down the hallway. Then came the keys. Metal scraping. Lock turning. And as his door began to open, he realized, there are places where justice isn't just forgotten. It's forbidden. The steel door creaked open slowly. Terrence pressed his back to the cold wall, heart racing. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, sliding across his bunk, his desk, his notes. Then a voice said, calm but chilling, "Where's the paper?" 2 guards entered, both wearing black gloves. One held a folder. The other held a baton. Terrence froze. He'd hidden his notes under the mattress thinking that would be enough. But in Pelican Bay there are no secrets. They tore the room apart, flipping his mattress, dumping his sink, kicking over his bucket. The sound of tearing paper echoed louder than the alarms. When they left, Terrence was bleeding from the mouth and his notes were gone. The next morning the warden's office logged it as a routine cell search. But everyone in the block knew what it really was. A message. Over the next few weeks, Terrence noticed the pattern. Every time an inmate filed a complaint or spoke out, something happened to them. One man was found hanging in his cell. Another fell down the stairs during transport. A third one disappeared into administrative segregation, never to be seen again. It wasn't justice. It was control. The SHU was supposed to be for gang leaders and dangerous men, but it became a weapon. Guards could label anyone as a gang associate with no proof, just a rumor, a drawing, or even a tattoo from years ago. Once you were labeled, you'd be sent to the SHU indefinitely. No trial. No end date. Terrence's cellmate Ray was one of those men. He'd been locked in the SHU for 12 years for a tattoo of a dragon that officers claimed symbolized gang loyalty. But Ray wasn't a gang member anymore. He'd converted to Islam, spent years reading law books, and even helped other inmates file appeals. That made him a problem. Ray told Terrence something one night that would change how he saw everything. They don't want justice here. Justice means accountability. Accountability means exposure. Pelican Bay runs on silence. Terrence listened, and for the first time he understood. It wasn't just bad guards or violent inmates. It was a system that depended on fear. But Pelican Bay had its own form of rebellion. Inmates started communicating through fishing lines, long threads of torn bedsheets slid under cell doors, carrying messages, sugar packets, even notes hidden in toothpaste tubes. They talked about unity, about refusing to eat, about showing the world what was happening inside. The plan spread quietly. One inmate in D block would start, then another. Soon hundreds would join. Then one morning it began. The breakfast trays rolled out. One by one, inmates pushed them back through the slot. No one touched the food. No one said a word. A silent protest. A hunger strike inside the most feared prison in America. At first, guards laughed. They thought it would last a day or two. But when the media caught wind, things changed. Reporters began calling. Families started asking questions. The outside world wanted to know what was really happening in Pelican Bay. Terrence finally felt hope. For the first time, the silence was breaking. But hope doesn't last long here. 3 days into the strike, the water was shut off. Men began collapsing. Officers entered the blocks with riot shields. And as the screams echoed again, Terrence realized they weren't fighting for justice anymore. They were fighting to survive. Because in Pelican Bay, when you try to expose the truth tries to kill you. By day 5, Pelican Bay was boiling. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, blood, and metal. The hunger strike had spread far beyond what the guards expected. Over 1,000 inmates now refusing meals, their bodies weak, but their spirits locked together like iron. Terrence's lips were cracked. His vision blurred. But he stayed strong. He wasn't doing this just for himself, he was doing it for Ghost, for Ray, for every man who vanished in the system. Then came the sound everyone feared. The steel boots. The hallway lights flickered on, one by one, as a full tactical team marched in. Black armor, shields, helmets. The kind they use for riots, even though no one was rioting. The first order was simple: compliance by force. They started pulling men from their cells one at a time. Anyone who refused food was extracted. Terrence heard the muffled screams, the clanging of shields, the thud of batons hitting flesh. Each time the sound stopped the same way, a sudden silence that made your stomach twist. By noon his turn came. The door opened. 5 men in riot gear stormed in. He hit the ground before they said a word, hands behind his head. He knew resistance meant pain. But that didn't save him. A knee pressed into his neck. His ribs cracked under weight. Someone shouted, "Stop resisting," even though he wasn't. Then came the pepper spray, burning his lungs, blinding his eyes. He gasped for air that wouldn't come. They dragged him out like a bag of trash, past the other cells. He could barely see, but he heard the whispers from inside the cells. "Stay strong, brother. Don't give up." They threw him into a small room. No window, no bed, just a drain in the floor. The kind of room that made time stop existing. Hours passed. Maybe days. He couldn't tell. When a nurse finally came, she didn't look him in the eye. She just said, "Drink," and slid a small cup of water through the door. Terrence was shaking but alive. And that's when he heard it, the sound of a faint tapping coming from the wall beside him. At first he thought he was imagining it. But then he realized it was Morse code, the old prison language. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Was Ray. Somehow he was still alive. Terrence pressed his ear to the wall and whispered, "What's happening?" Through faint taps, Ray answered, "They're breaking the leaders. If we stop, it all disappears." That single message kept Terrence going. Even in a place where justice didn't exist, loyalty still did. A week later, after national media picked up the story, outside pressure grew. Human rights lawyers demanded entry. The state couldn't ignore it anymore. Investigations were announced. Promises were made. Cameras were brought in. For a moment, it looked like the truth would finally come out. But then something strange happened. The footage of the extractions disappeared. The medical reports were sealed. The officers involved were transferred, not fired. When the hunger strike ended, nothing had changed. But something inside Terrence had. He knew now that Pelican Bay wasn't just a prison. It was a system designed to erase accountability, A place where justice was a word used to control men, not protect them. And as he sat back in his cell, his ribs still bruised, he whispered to himself, "If justice doesn't exist here, then I'll make it exist." He began to plan again. But this time it wasn't about writing notes. It was about escape, not from the prison walls, but from the silence that kept them all invisible. And when Terrence made his first move, he didn't know it yet. But it would start something that Pelican Bay had never seen before. The night was thick with fog rolling off the Pacific and creeping through the razor wire. From the outside, Pelican Bay looked almost peaceful, a fortress asleep under the stars. But inside, something was stirring. Terrence sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at a cracked vent in the corner of his cell. Through that vent, he could hear voices from other cells, whispers that passed like smoke through the ducts. Plans. Warnings. Hope. It wasn't an escape plan to run from the prison. It was an escape plan to break the silence. A plan to leak everything, the beatings, the hunger strike, the green wall, straight to the outside world. And the man leading it was Ray. After the strike, Ray had been moved to another block, but he wasn't done fighting. He had contacts, family members, activists, even a journalist who once covered Pelican Bay before being banned. Through coded letters hidden inside Bible pages, Ray began sending messages out. Every word was a piece of a puzzle. And Terrence was one of the few men who knew how to finish it. But danger in Pelican Bay moves faster than light. One wrong word, one wrong glance, and everything can vanish. One evening, while cleaning his cell floor, Terrence noticed something under his door, a folded paper. No name. No handwriting. Just 3 words, "They know everything." His stomach dropped. He shoved the paper into his pocket, pretending not to react. But the hallway cameras caught everything, even fear. That night his door didn't open. The lights didn't flicker. But Terrence couldn't sleep. Every sound, the keys, the coughs, the metal clanks, felt like a countdown. He was sure someone would come for him. When morning came, the guards looked different. They were quiet, focused. And then he saw it, the white tape across certain doors. Ray's cell was one of them. The rumor spread fast. The green wall had found out about the letters. Ray was in the infirmary, or worse. Terrence's hands shook. He wanted to shout, but shouting was suicide here. So he did the only thing he could, he started writing again. This time he didn't use paper. He scratched words into the underside of his bunk with a sharpened screw. Dates, times, names. Every act of cruelty he could remember. He knew someone someday would find it. Days passed like years. Then one afternoon an announcement echoed through the speaker. Cell 212, prepare for transfer. That was Terrence's number. 2 guards appeared, faces blank behind their helmets. No explanation. No paperwork. Just chains. They cuffed his wrists, his ankles, even his waist. As they led him down the corridor, Terrence noticed the cameras turning slightly away, just enough not to record what was coming. They dragged him into an empty hallway near the showers. No other inmates. No sound. Then one of them spoke. "You think anyone cares about your little notes?" The first hit knocked him into the wall. The second split his lip. Each blow was followed by silence, the kind that swallows screams. When it was over, Terrence lay in a pool of his own blood, half conscious. They left him there, whispering as they walked away. "This is justice." Hours later, another guard found him. Not one of the green wall, just a rookie. His hands trembled as he called for medical. As Terrence was wheeled out on a stretcher, he heard one of the older guards mutter, "Should have stayed quiet." But Terrence wasn't dead. He woke up 3 days later in the prison hospital, his ribs bandaged, his jaw wired. And taped to the underside of his forestand was a piece of paper. It was from Ray. The handwriting was shaky but clear. "It's not over. They can kill us, but they can't kill the truth." Terrence stared at the note, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time he smiled, even through the pain. Because he realized something powerful. Justice doesn't live in the system. It lives in the men who refuse to forget. And even though Pelican Bay had buried countless truths this time, it had buried something alive. The hospital room was silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Every sound echoed the slow pulse, the hiss of the oxygen tube, the faint rattle of metal carts in the hallway. Terrence's body was broken, but his mind refused to rest. He stared at the ceiling, trying to piece together what had happened. He could still feel the weight of the baton strikes on his back, the taste of blood in his mouth. The pain was constant, a reminder that in Pelican Bay survival came with a price. 3 days had passed since the beating. No visitors. No statements. No cameras. According to the paperwork, Terrence had slipped and fallen. That was the official story. But under his four-stand, Ray's note still fluttered in the air-conditioning breeze. It's not over. They can kill us, but they can't kill the truth. He read it over and over, letting the words burn into his mind like a brand. The truth. That was what they feared most. Late that night, the door opened quietly. A nurse walked in, young, tired, her badge slightly crooked. Terrence tensed, expecting another trick, but she didn't look like the others. She kept glancing over her shoulder, nervous. "You're Terrence Lewis?" she whispered. He nodded weakly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "I found this in the laundry bin," she said. "I think it's for you." Terrence's heart pounded as he unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Race. They moved me again. I don't know where. But someone inside is helping us. Trust the nurse." He looked up, eyes wide. "You?" She nodded slightly. "My brother's in here. He told me about the hunger strike. About what they do. He said if I ever meet someone named Terrence to help him." Terrence could barely believe what he was hearing. For the first time, someone from outside the system, someone who wore the uniform, was willing to help. The nurse continued, voice trembling. "I've seen things here I can't unsee. Men coming in fine and leaving, covered in bruises. Files rewritten. Cameras turned off. I'm scared, but I can't stay silent anymore." Terrence's mind raced. This was the chance he'd been waiting for. He just needed to get a message out. He asked her to bring him a pen, nothing fancy, just something small. She hesitated, then nodded. "I'll come back on my next shift." When she left, Terrence lay in the dark, every breath a reminder that he was still alive, and that staying alive now had a purpose. The next morning, 2 guards appeared at his door. "Transfer," one of them said. "Where?" Terrence asked. "Doesn't matter." They wheeled him out of the infirmary, through a maze of locked corridors. He tried to count the turns, left, right again, but pain clouded his focus. When they stopped, he saw the words painted on the steel door, Administrative Segregation Unit. SHU. Again. They chained him to the bed inside, saying he was on suicide watch. But Terrence knew better. This was isolation, the kind that broke men from the inside out. Hours turned into days. No clock. No sound. Just his heartbeat and the faint hum of the air vent. Until one night, something slid under the door, a thin piece of plastic wrapped in tape. He peeled it open. Inside was a small pen and a single sheet of paper. It was from the nurse. She'd risked everything to get it to him. And at that moment, Terrence made a decision. He would write the truth of Pelican Bay, every lie, every bruise, every death, and make sure it reached the world even if it cost him his life. He began to write. He wrote about Ghost's death, how the cameras went dark, how the guards laughed. He wrote about Ray, the false gang label, the endless isolation. He wrote about the hunger strike, the blood, the pepper spray, the water that never came. And he wrote about the green wall, the secret brotherhood that protected the guilty. Each word was carved out of pain and memory. By the time he finished, his hands were trembling but his heart was steady. He folded the note tightly, wrapped it in plastic again and slid it under the vent. The plan was simple. The nurse would collect it during her rounds. But Pelican Bay never stays quiet for long. The next morning, alarms blared through the block. Search order. Everyone down. Terrence's heart dropped. Through the small window he saw guards tearing through cells, flipping bunks, ripping vents, dumping toilets. Someone had talked. Minutes later his door swung open. The same officer who had beaten him stepped in, baton in hand. "Still writing, huh?" the man said. He kicked over the bed, scattering papers that weren't even there. "Who's helping you?" Terrence stayed silent. The officer leaned closer, smiling. "Justice doesn't exist here, son. The sooner you accept that, the longer you live." Then suddenly the man's radio crackled. "Command, we've got a call from the front gate. Media's here. They're asking questions about the hospital file." The guard froze, eyes wide. Then he turned to Terrence and hissed, "You think the outside world cares about you? You're a criminal. You're nothing." He stormed out. Terrence sat in silence, shaking. The nurse had done it. She'd made contact with the journalist. That meant the truth was already out. But it also meant he was now the most wanted man inside Pelican Bay. He pressed his palm against the wall, whispering, "Hold on, Ray. We're almost there." The lights flickered. Down the hall, he heard the heavy clank of doors opening. Then the screams began again, chaos erupting, alarms wailing. Something massive was happening. And Terrence realized, with a chill running through his spine, the prison was losing control. The siren screamed so loud it felt like the walls were shaking. Red lights flashed through the slit in Terrence's door, painting his cell in bloody bursts of color. He sat up slowly, every muscle aching, trying to listen past the noise. He could hear boots running, men yelling, metal doors slamming. This wasn't just a random fight. This sounded bigger. A voice blared over the speaker. All inmates locked down. Remain on your bunks. Terrence let out a short, bitter laugh. He was already locked down. Already chained to a bed. But even from here he could feel it. Pelican Bay wasn't in control anymore. Minutes turned into hours. The noise outside kept rising, then falling like waves crashing against concrete. He heard something heavy roll by, maybe a gurney. Then came the smell of smoke. Fire. Somebody had set something on fire. His heart raced. Fires didn't just happen in a place like this. They were messages. Footsteps stopped outside his door. He heard keys, then the metal slot slid open. The nurse's eyes appeared in the small gap. Her face was pale, her voice rushed. They know. Terrence's chest tightened. About the letter? She nodded. Internal Affairs showed up this morning. So did some people from the state. They're asking questions no one wants to answer. The warden is furious. They think someone leaked records from the hospital, and your name is all over them. Terrence swallowed hard. So what happens now? She glanced over her shoulder. They can't make this disappear like before. Too many people are watching now. But that doesn't mean you're safe. He stared at her, trying to read her eyes. Am I getting out of here? She hesitated. They're talking about moving you. Not out of prison, just out of sight. He knew what that meant. Transfers were one of Pelican Bay's favorite tricks. Move a problem inmate somewhere else. Change paperwork. Rewrite the story. What about Ray? Terrence asked. Her face dropped. I don't know. They've moved him twice. I've seen his name on reports. Then it disappears. The words cut deeper than any baton. Disappears. Listen, she whispered. The journalist I contacted. Her name is Amanda. She works for a big outlet. She's already published a piece on the hunger strike. People are sharing it. Families are calling. Lawyers are sending letters. It's getting loud out there. Loud is good, Terrence said quietly. Yeah, she answered. But loud makes dangerous people desperate. Suddenly, another voice shouted from down the hall. Nurse, let's go. We need you in C block. She flinched. I have to go. I'll come back if I can. The slot slammed shut. Her footsteps disappeared. Terrence leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closed. Outside, Pelican Bay was burning in its own way, not with fire but with pressure. Questions. Witnesses. For years the prison ran on silence. Now the silence was cracking. And somewhere inside that chaos, the Green Wall was planning its next move. Because if justice didn't exist here, they would do anything to keep it that way. The next morning the sirens were gone. The lights were steady. From the outside, everything looked normal again. But Terrence knew better. Prisons don't calm down, they reset. 2 guards came to his door. Not the usual ones. These men looked cleaner, sharper. Their uniforms had polished badges. Lewis, Terrence, one of them said. That's me. You're being interviewed. He blinked. By who? They didn't answer. They shackled his wrists and ankles, then chained him to a waist belt. Standard procedure. But the walk was different this time. Instead of going deeper into the prison, they led him toward the front. The windows changed, small then slightly larger. He saw actual daylight for the first time in weeks. They brought him into a small room with a bolted-down table and 2 chairs. There was a camera in the corner, a red light blinking. 2 people waited inside. One wore a suit and glasses, holding a folder. The other wore a simple blazer, hair tied back, eyes sharp and focused. Amanda, he thought. The man in the suit spoke first. Mr. Lewis, I'm investigator Daniel Cole from the state. This is Amanda Reyes, an independent journalist. You've been identified as a key witness regarding alleged abuses inside Pelican Bay State Prison. Terrence sat slowly, chains clinking. Alleged, he repeated quietly. We're here to listen, Amanda said. Her voice was calm but strong. You're not on trial right now. We just want the truth. He looked at the camera, then at the door. He knew it wasn't just recording him. It was recording everyone, including them. Nothing I say is safe in here, he said. Daniel nodded. You're right. But we've already received medical records, reports, and testimony from other sources. You're not alone, Terrence. Things are changing. He took a deep breath. Then he started talking. He told them about Ghost, The cameras, the blackout, the way the guards dragged him back half dead. He told them about the hunger strike, the pepper spray, the shut-off water, the forced extractions. He told them about Ray, the bogus gang label, the endless isolation. He described the Green Wall, not just as a rumor but as a culture. Officers who never wrote each other up. Men who wore matching tattoos under their uniforms. The unwritten rule, never break the line. Amanda wrote everything down, her eyes never leaving his face. Daniel kept checking the folder as if matching Terrence's words to something he already had. After nearly an hour, Daniel closed the file. There's enough here to push for a full investigation, he said. Amanda leaned forward. Terrence, I'm going to publish this. But I need to know, are you ready for what happens after? He looked at her, tired but steady. In here we suffer in silence. Out there, at least the suffering means something. She nodded slowly. I promise you, I won't let them twist your words. The door opened. The guard stepped back in. Time's up, one of them snapped. As they led him out of the room, Amanda called out. Terrence, one more thing. He turned his head slightly. You said justice doesn't exist in here, she said. Do you still believe that? He thought for a moment. Then answered, loud enough for the camera to hear. In here? No. But maybe, if the right people keep watching. Justice can still exist because of here. The guard shoved him forward. Back in his cell, he replayed that moment over and over in his mind. He didn't know it yet, but that line would become the headline of Amanda's story, shared across millions of screens. And as his name spread, his danger grew. Because now, Terrence Lewis wasn't just another inmate number. He was a problem. And Pelican Bay had a way of making problems disappear. 2 days later, the tone changed. The guards weren't just cold, they were angry. Whispers followed him down the corridor. Snitch. Reporter's pet. Dead man walking. He tried to ignore them, but you can't ignore eyes that want you gone. That night, his dinner tray arrived late. The food looked different. Something floated in the juice that didn't belong there. He pushed it away. His stomach groaned with hunger, but his fear was louder. Poison didn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it was just bad chicken on a report. The nurse came by that evening, moving fast, pretending not to know him. But as she checked his chart, she whispered under her breath. They're trying to break you. Don't eat anything that isn't sealed. If your stomach hurts suddenly, demand outside medical. Don't sign anything. He nodded slightly. Ray, he whispered. She paused. Her jaw clenched. I saw his name on a transport list yesterday, she said. But the destination line was blank. Blank. In a system built on paperwork, blank meant one of two things. Someplace secret. Or nowhere at all. She squeezed his wrist once, a tiny human gesture in an inhuman place, then walked out. The article hit the internet that night. Amanda's story exploded. Videos. Headlines. Hashtags. Pelican Bay, the prison where justice doesn't exist. Families of inmates shared it. Former guards spoke anonymously. Old lawsuits were dragged back into the light. Talk shows debated it. Politicians argued about law and order versus human rights. Some people said, they're criminals. Who cares? Others said, if this can happen in there, who's next? Inside the prison, the reaction was immediate. Inmates banged on their doors in rhythm, sending a message through steel and concrete. We are still here. The Green Wall reacted too. A new policy rolled out overnight. No more group yard time for certain blocks. Mail slowed down. Books were lost in processing. Terrence's name vanished from the call-out list for legal appointments. His outgoing letters were held for review. He had become a ghost that was still breathing. One afternoon, as he lay on his bunk, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, his speaker crackled. Inmate Lewis, report to receiving and release. Receiving and release. R&R. That was where inmates went when they were transferred, or leaving. His hands shook. They cuffed him, chained him, then led him through another maze of corridors. He saw something he hadn't seen in months, the front gate. On the other side of the glass he saw sky. Real sky. A man in a suit stood at a desk with a stack of papers. Lewis, he said, barely looking up. You're being transferred. Where? Terrence asked. The man clicked his pen. Out of Pelican Bay. For a second, hope sparked in his chest. Then the man added. To a facility where you'll be under closer supervision. Your status has been upgraded to high risk. For your safety. That phrase. For your safety. Inside the system, those words often meant the opposite. Terrence's mind raced. If they moved him far away, his link to Amanda, to the nurse, to what was happening here, would weaken. He would become just another name in another file in another cold building. He took a deep breath. "Can I speak to my lawyer?" The man frowned. "You don't have a lawyer on file." Terrence stared at him. "What about the group that's been sending letters? The human rights people?" The man shrugged. "Nothing in your chart about that." His chart. His record. The story the prison told about him, edited, cleaned, controlled. Terrence realized something chilling. Even if the outside world was watching, the system was already changing the script behind the scenes. They could erase calls, lose letters, rewrite reasons. His transfer papers were nearly signed. The guards stood ready. Then suddenly the door behind them swung open. A woman walked in holding a thick folder and a badge. "Wait," she said firmly. "That transfer is on hold." Everyone in the room turned. "Who are you?" the man in the suit asked. She placed her ID on the table. "Attorney Melissa Carter, Prison Justice Project. I represent Mr. Lewis now." The room froze. And for the first time in a very long time, someone with real power was standing on Terrence's side. Melissa sat across from Terrence in a tiny attorney-client room, separated only by a metal table and a camera in the corner. Her folder was thick with papers, photos, and printed emails. She didn't waste time. "Terrence, I've read everything. Your medical file. The incident reports. The article. The letters you tried to send out." His eyes widened. "You got them?" "Some," she said. "Not all. A lot are missing. But missing papers are evidence too." He stared at her, trying to understand. "Why are you helping me?" She leaned forward. "Because this isn't just about you. It's about a prison that thinks it can decide who counts as human and who doesn't. And if we can prove what's happening here, we can force change, not just for you but for everyone trapped in places like this." Her words lit a fire inside him. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "I need you to remember everything," she said. "Every name. Every date. Every threat. Every time a report didn't match what really happened. I need details they can't explain away." He nodded slowly. He had been collecting those details in his mind for years. She slid a form across the table. "This is a consent form. It lets me access all your records, appeal decisions, file complaints on your behalf." He picked up the pen, hesitated, then signed. His hand shook but his heart felt steady. "Terrence," she said quietly, "I won't lie to you. This will make your life harder in the short term. They're going to come after you, in small ways, in quiet ways. Lost mail. Broken property. Sudden cell searches. Maybe worse." He looked her in the eye. "My life is already hard. At least this way it means something." She smiled, not a big smile but a real one. "That's what I needed to hear." After the meeting, things shifted. Guards searched his cell 3 times in one day. His mattress was flipped. His few personal items were thrown on the floor. His toothbrush snapped in half by mistake. At chow, guards watched him with cold eyes. At yard, he could feel other inmates staring. Some with respect. Some with fear. Some with anger, because when one man draws attention, everyone pays. One older inmate, Marcus, walked up to him during the limited yard time he got. His arms were covered in faded tattoos, stories written in ink. "You the guy in that article?" Marcus asked. Terrence nodded. "Yeah." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You stirred up a hornet's nest, brother. But, about time someone did." He paused, then added, "You watch yourself. Some of the guards want you gone. But some of the homies? They don't like the spotlight either. They like things quiet. Business as usual." Terrence understood. When a system is built on secret deals and silent suffering, truth is dangerous from all sides. That night, back in his cell, the lights flickered again. The speaker crackled on. "Inmate Lewis, step away from the door. Cell inspection." He rolled his eyes, already exhausted. But as the small slot slid open, a folded piece of paper dropped inside. No stamps. No markings. Just a sentence. "Ray is alive." Terrence's hands shook as he stared at the words. "Alive." On the back there was one more line. "They moved him to a secret unit. He says, tell Terrence the fight isn't over." He pressed the note to his chest, breathing deeply. Ray was alive. Somewhere in this concrete maze, the man who started it all was still fighting. And if Ray could keep going in the dark, so could he. He lay down on his bunk, eyes open, ideas forming. What if the story wasn't just about suffering? What if Amanda's next article, Melissa's next filing, wasn't just about what Pelican Bay did wrong, but about how the men inside were resisting? Not with riots. Not with knives. But with truth. But as that thought settled in, another sound shattered the moment. From down the tier a scream echoed, sharp, panicked. Then the thud of boots. The slam of a heavy door. Terrence jumped up, pressing his face to the cold steel. "Who is that?" he shouted. Another inmate yelled back, voice shaking. "They took Marcus. They said he was inciting disorder, after talking to you." Terrence's blood ran cold. His fight for justice wasn't just costing him now. It was dragging in anyone who stood too close. And Pelican Bay was starting to hit back. Hard, the sound of Marcus's screams haunted the night. Even after it stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier, the kind that presses against your chest and makes every breath feel borrowed. Terrence sat on his bunk, fists clenched. He'd seen men beaten, broken, and buried in paperwork before, but this was different. Marcus wasn't just another inmate, he was a voice of reason, someone who could calm others when the tension spiked. And now he was gone. The guards walked by like nothing had happened. One of them smirked through the small window on Terrence's door. "Sleep tight, hero." The words cut deep, but Terrence didn't answer. He knew how the system worked. They wanted him to react, to lash out so they could call it aggression, and lock him down even harder. He sat in the dark, thinking. If they were taking people for talking to him, then it wasn't just his story anymore. It was everyone's. The next day, a new inmate was moved into the cell across from him. A tall man with a deep scar under his eye and a quiet stare. The guards called him Booker. Nobody knew much about him, except that he'd done time in several other high-security prisons. When the guards were gone, Booker leaned closer to the door and whispered, "You're Lewis?" Terrence hesitated. "Yeah. I heard about you," Booker said. "That story outside, the one with your name on it, it's everywhere. You messed them up, man. Real bad." "I didn't do it to mess anyone up," Terrence said quietly. "I did it because people needed to know." Booker nodded. "Well, they know now. But you should know something too." "What?" "There's talk in C-Block. Some guards are saying you ain't gonna make it to Christmas. They're waiting for things to cool down, then they'll move you to transport. Accidents happen on transport." Terrence felt his stomach twist. "How do you know that?" Booker smiled sadly. "Because that's what they said about my brother." The air between them went cold. Neither man spoke for a while. That night, Booker slid a small folded paper under Terrence's door. On it were just 3 words. "Contact the lawyer." Terrence tore off a piece of toilet paper and wrote back. "How?" A few minutes later, the paper slid back again. "There's a guard, not Green Wall. He'll help. Look for the one with the red watchband." Terrence didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made him flinch. Every passing step felt like it could be the last thing he heard before a transfer that never ended. Days passed. Then, during morning rounds, he saw it. A guard, younger than the others, wearing a red band on his wrist. Their eyes met for a split second. Later that night, the same guard returned during mail call. He slipped an envelope into Terrence's slot, but it wasn't the usual government form. It was blank. Inside, one line was written. "You're not crazy. We see it too." Terrence looked up, but the guard was already gone. That note changed everything. It meant there were cracks in the wall, people inside who were done looking away. The next morning, Melissa returned. This time she looked different, less composed, more serious. "Terrence," she said, sitting down, "something's happening." The story went national. "There's going to be a hearing, not just about you but about Pelican Bay's practices. The Department of Justice is looking into it." He could hardly believe it. "You mean, it's really happening?" "Yes," she said. "But it's dangerous now. You're the face of it. They'll want to make an example out of you." He nodded slowly. "What about Ray?" "Booker told me." "I'm working on that," she said. "But they're stonewalling. I can't find his transfer file anywhere. It's like he vanished." Terrence's jaw tightened. "Then he's alive." Melissa raised an eyebrow. "You think so?" He nodded. "If he was dead, they'd have a report to prove it. If he's missing, it means he's where the reports can't reach." She sighed. "You might be right." As she gathered her papers, she looked at him one last time. "Terrence, if they try to move you again, stall. Don't sign anything. I'll get a federal order to freeze your transfer. Just hold on." "I've been holding on for years," he said with a faint smile. "I can keep doing it a little longer." That night the speaker clicked again. "Cell 212, prepare for movement." Terrence froze. 2 guards entered, both unfamiliar. "You're being relocated," one said flatly. "Where to?" "No idea. Orders from the top." He remembered Melissa's warning. "Let me speak to my lawyer," he demanded. They ignored him. He refused to stand. The first guard grabbed his arm hard. "Don't make this difficult." But Terrence didn't move. "Call my lawyer," he said again. The guard raised his baton. But before he could swing, a voice shouted from the end of the tier. "Hold up." It was the younger guard, the one with the red watchband. He walked up fast, holding a clipboard. "Warden's orders changed," he said, handing the paper over. The other guard frowned, confused. "What?" "Transfers on hold. DOJ wants him available for questioning." After a tense pause, the guards left. Terrence let out a shaky breath. He looked at the red-banded guard, who leaned close and whispered, "You didn't hear it from me, but something big's coming. The warden's panicking. Files are disappearing. They're cleaning house." Then he left, locking the door behind him. Terrence sat down slowly, his pulse pounding. The system that had buried justice for decades was starting to eat itself alive. But deep down he knew. The most dangerous moment wasn't when you were losing. It was when you were finally winning. Because that's when the real retaliation began. And Pelican Bay still had one last card to play. The truth that couldn't be buried. The next 48 hours at Pelican Bay felt like the end of the world. The alarms blared non-stop, echoing through every tier. Doors slammed, boots thundered, and voices shouted orders that no one obeyed. The Green Wall, the secret brotherhood of guards, was collapsing under its own weight. The Department of Justice investigators had arrived. Some officers were being questioned. Others were shredding files. The truth was finally crawling out of the shadows, and it was uglier than anyone outside had imagined. Terrence sat on his bunk, head bowed, when the young guard with the red watchband appeared again. He looked different this time, tired, anxious, but somehow relieved. "Lewis," he said quietly, "pack up your stuff." Terrence's stomach dropped. "Another transfer?" The guard shook his head. "Not this time. You're leaving Pelican Bay, for real." Terrence stared at him, unsure if it was another setup. But then he noticed the man's trembling hands, and the small flash drive tucked in his shirt pocket. "What's that?" Terrence asked. The guard leaned closer. "It's everything," he whispered. "Footage, reports, hospital records, even the order that killed Ghost. They tried to erase it all, but I saved copies. The world needs to see what this place really is." Terrence could hardly breathe. "You're risking your life." The guard nodded. "Yeah. But maybe that's what justice looks like." He slid the flash drive into Terrence's hand and whispered, "Give it to your lawyer. Don't lose it. It's the nail in their coffin." Then for the last time he walked away without looking back. When the transport van finally pulled out of Pelican Bay, Terrence sat shackled in the back, staring through the small, barred window. The ocean stretched out beyond the trees, dark, endless, cold. He could still see the razor wire glinting in the morning light, like teeth waiting to bite again. But for the first time in years, he wasn't behind it. Beside him, an escort guard read quietly from a clipboard. "Terrence Lewis, transferred to federal protective custody pending testimony." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He knew where he was going, not freedom but something close enough. Weeks later he sat in a courtroom in Sacramento. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed. Melissa sat beside him, steady as ever, with Amanda in the gallery just behind her. The hearing was supposed to be about policy. But it became something else, a reckoning. Terrence took the stand. He told them about Ghost, about Ray, about the hunger strike, about the Green Wall, about the way justice was traded for silence. His voice didn't shake. He didn't cry. He spoke like a man who had already lost everything and had nothing left but truth. When he finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge leaned forward and said, "Mr. Lewis, if what you've testified is true, then Pelican Bay is not a correctional institution. It's a crime scene." The flash of cameras filled the room. That one sentence spread across the country. Pelican Bay, a crime scene hidden in plain sight. For the first time in decades, the system was forced to look at itself. Officers were indicted. Files reopened. New oversight laws introduced. It didn't fix everything. But it broke the silence, and that was enough to start change. Months passed. Terrence was moved to a small facility upstate, safer, quieter. He spent his days writing letters, speaking to advocacy groups, and testifying by video in ongoing cases. He wasn't free, but he was heard. Then one morning, Melissa visited him with a small envelope. "No return address," she said, sliding it across the table. Terrence opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph, blurry, taken through a chain-link fence. Older, thinner, but smiling. On the back, written in faint ink, Still alive. Still fighting. Terrence stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, "We made it, brother." Melissa smiled softly. "Maybe not justice," she said, "but truth." He nodded. "Yeah. And sometimes, that's the same thing." Outside, the wind from the Pacific rolled over the hills, cold and clean. The same air that once carried the screams of Pelican Bay now carried something else, the sound of change. For years, Pelican Bay had buried men in silence, convinced that no one cared what happened behind its walls. But silence doesn't last forever. And when justice doesn't exist, truth becomes the only weapon left. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Terrence whispered one final thought to himself, not in anger but in peace. They tried to bury us. But they forgot, we were seeds. This was the untold story of Pelican Bay, the prison where justice doesn't exist. A place that tried to erase truth, but ended up exposing its own darkness. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, like, share, and subscribe to help uncover more hidden truths behind America's most feared prisons.